Welcome to City Church's On-Demand Messages. My name is Josh, and we're so glad that you're tuning in whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. In fact, it's possible that you either stumbled across us online or somebody shared this, and you are leading it maybe for the first time. If you have any questions or want to know more about who we are, we'd love for you to visit our website. In fact, if you can even plan your first visit on our website. If you've got kids, we have a kids ministry specifically for them. You can plan your visit. You can go ahead and check them in, learn more about what that will be like. Maybe a middle or high school student, we've got you covered. And so if you have any questions or anything that we can do for you, please just check out our website. Today's message is going to be very special, and we're thankful that you're tuning in. It'll be anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. And so if we can do anything for you, please let us know. But enjoy today's message.
And so today is Vision Sunday. So say it with me, Vision Sunday. Again, Vision Sunday. One more time. Vision Sunday. There we go. It's important that we have vision. In fact, there's a passage of scripture, and I love this version of it, and here's what it says. It says, if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. But when they attend to what he reveals, they are most blessed. I don't know if you've ever tried to walk in the dark before. There are times my dog, our dog wakes up and needs to go outside, and I have made my way through the dark to the back door to let him out. And before you know it, I feel like I'm walking on a bed of nails because my kids have left Legos out. Anybody? Yep. Anybody still a little angry about that? Okay, so, so you walk out and it's like walking on these nails because you couldn't see it because it's in the dark. You can't see where you're going. There have been times when it's been a delayed reaction to letting the dog out, and as I'm walking in the dark to let the dog out, I realize, I no longer need to let the dog out because of what I'm standing in. And so I've had moments like that before. Anybody ever been there? Just me? Okay, you're lying. We need to see where we're going. And I think what Vision Sunday is important for us is it's important for us that we physically see what God is doing and how he's moving and where he's going. It's an opportunity to see what Jesus is doing and where he is leading his church. In fact, this month I'd encourage you, just show up consistently for the next 3 weeks because it's going to be really a vision month. Next week we're going to talk about this Here to Stay mission and vision that we've had over the last 2 years for this building in downtown. Following week, Warren's going to teach. It's going to be just an incredible vision of, hey, this is what our lives are supposed to look like. But today, we're kind of looking at, God, where are you leading our church and what are you doing in our midst? And so we have this important, probably the best vision caster that we have ever known, and his name is Jesus. He was one of the best vision casters ever. He would tell you and look at people and say, this is what my preferred future for you, what I hope your life looks like. And so Jesus comes to this earth, begins his ministry, and gives one of the best vision speeches ever. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And he begins to introduce these values to these people, and he's about to call them a name and give them this name and this title. And so we're going to jump right in. Matthew 5:13. It's the only passage we're going to be in this morning. Matthew 5:13 says this, you are the what? Salt. Y'all, come on. Of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. So two incredible words here, salt and you. And so salt, we understand salt, but at this point, salt was incredibly valuable. And so Warren and John has asked, what does salt belong on? The answer is everything, but specifically popcorn for me, okay? Salt belongs on popcorn. When I go to the theater, I don't know if you know this, but you can ask for extra cups of the salt that they put on the popcorn, and you just keep dousing it. They just keep giving it. It's like Christmas at the theater, okay? So I believe salt belongs in everything, but I'm getting older. I've turned 40, and so now people are telling me to be weary of salt and be warned of salt. But salt is better on everything. It makes a difference on whatever it touches. But back then, salt was valuable. In fact, salt was a currency. So for them back in the day, to Roman soldiers, if you were doing a good job, they would actually come to you and they would give you salt. So imagine now, your employer's like, hey, listen, you're crushing it right now. I'm really proud of you, and I got a raise for you. There you go. Got you. Great job. Don't spend it all in one place. I need that back, actually. Okay, so, but imagine, but this was a big deal for them. They're like, yes, we got a raise. It was called a salarium, which is where we get salary from. This was a valuable currency. And so he comes to them and he says, you, so that is a collective, this group of people, but also you personally, You are the salt of the earth. Now, for these people, they felt undervalued and they felt unappreciated. They felt like they had no political influence, no financial influence. They felt like no one was paying attention to them. Maybe you feel the same way. That no one's paying attention to me. I'm overlooked. I'm overseen. There's no way I can do anything. And he says that you are valuable. And not just to God, but you are actually valuable to his movement. You are valuable to this group of people. And so he says, hey, you need to live this out. Now, most of us are here because we rubbed shoulders with somebody who was salty. Like we rubbed shoulders with somebody who lived a different way, and they lived a different kind of life, and it attracted us, and before we knew it, we adopted it. Because a difference maker was in the location where we were. Because we were created to make a difference, because salt always makes a difference. Specifically in two ways, it's for seasoning. So like my son is big on this. We go to a Mexican restaurant and he gets a chip. One chip, pulls it out, douses it with salt and just eats it, right? Anybody do that? Okay, yep, all right, at least you're honest. All right, so, I mean, it's good and it's great for seasoning. Salt was created to add purpose and bring out flavor in food. You see, what salt does is it adds value to what it exists. See, the job of salt, I love this, is not to make you think how great it is, but how great the thing it is connected to. So the job of salt is not to be like, man, this salt on this steak is phenomenal. Or this salt on this watermelon, I don't even know, but like is amazing. No. You put salt on the watermelon and you say, what's amazing? The watermelon's amazing. Right? The job of salt is not to make you look at it and say, look how great I am. The job of salt is to bring out and add value to whatever it is on. You see, that's what we were created to do. We should be seasoning things on this earth. We have a value at our church that we are for all people, which means it doesn't matter the color of your skin, your background, your age, your story, that God wants to use you, and he's placed you wherever you are to use you in a specific way. And we were all created to add seasoning, to add value to things wherever we are and wherever God places us. Doesn't matter who you are, you have an opportunity to add value to the things on this earth. It's also a preservative, which we'll come to at the end, but I mean, there were no space for refrigerators. And if there was space for a refrigerator, there wouldn't be one to put in that space. They didn't have refrigerators back then, and so they would take this raw meat, and the way they would preserve it was to put salt on it. We'll come back to that. But he looks at this group of people, and he says, you, collectively, were created to add value to the things of this earth. So, 2018, it was April 2018, we met for the first time with a group of people that were interested in being a part of City Church in our living room. I was 100% honest right now, okay? Always 100% honest, but just like, being real. I was fairly confident that 2/3 of the people were not going to come back after this time, this first time we met, okay? Just because I was like, for the first time ever, we were getting to share our heart for this church, of what it was going to look like, what we were going to be about. We knew we were going to call it City Church because it came from two passages, Matthew 5:14. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, and Jeremiah 29:7, seek the peace of the city to which I've sent you. And so we said, hey, at that point, we were saying we want to be the city of God for the city of Griffin. We didn't have a lot figured out, but we did know one thing, that we looked at everyone in that room that day and for the last 5 years and have said, we believe beyond a shadow of doubt that we were created to add value and to bring value to Griffin. And not just to bring value to Griffin, but because there's 20,000 people in the city limits that do not know the name of Jesus. And so the reason why we are called to be salt and add value is not just so that they would look back at us, but they would look at the one we were connected to, God, and that they would make their way and find their way back to God and be saved. That's why we exist. And so because of that, we're going to add value wherever we can do that. Now, that began to be refined into our vision is to be a Jesus movement that awakens the soul in the city. So we want to be a movement, not a church. We want to be a movement. This thing that Jesus, when he looked at them and he said, it was a movement. We want to follow Jesus. We want to be a Jesus-led movement that awakens the soul in the city. We believe that as more people come to know Jesus, that's when our city becomes awakened to who Jesus is. That was our heart. And so we said that's what we're going to do, even down to our logo, C. This C, it was created intentionally. There you go. It's here. So if you look at the C, listen, we We want to be the people that talk about things from stage that people aren't willing to talk about behind closed doors. Our city is divided racially. It is. It's divided socioeconomically. And so when we even thought about what we wanted to represent Jesus in this movement, we just said, okay, let's just put a C for city, and let's just create a division. Like some of you have looked and thought that they ran out of ink sometimes on the C, but it wasn't. It was intentional. You can imagine that the C is cut in two because we live in a divided city. We also believe that there's the city of God and Griffin, his church, and there's also the city of Griffin. And so there's this gap here, there's this separation. We believe that Jesus is that bridge. And so we want to be that bridge, however and wherever we can be that bridge. And so we said that we want to be salt in this space in that way. And so the first way that we're going to be salt is through an ice cream truck. We've handed out over 100,000 pieces of ice cream. This year to date, 13,000 pieces of ice cream. It's been, over the last 5 years, it's been a way that we can be this bridge and stand in this gap for people and for things. The next thing we said was a movie in the park. We've done over 30 movies in the park. Here's the crazy thing. We've seen in the last 5 years, 125 people baptized through city, which is amazing. Half of them have come from the ice cream truck or movie in the park, people that we've met through there. And so it matters that we buy out Walmart with ice cream, okay? It matters that we show up 6 times a year in the park and show a movie because we began to build this bridge and live in this gap where maybe someone else wasn't willing to live, where it's a little messy at times, sure, but people are coming to know Jesus, and so we're going to continue to live in this gap. And so it continued from there, and we stepped into Orrs Elementary. And we began to invest in Orrs Elementary and become the largest single provider of mentors at in Spalding County through Orrs Elementary. And then we went to other local churches and said, now you go do this in other elementary schools, in other middle schools, in other public schools, and that stuff's beginning to happen. Then we went from there and we said, okay, the county came to us and asked us to take over rec basketball in Spalding County. And so last year there was 330 kids and 38 coaches served through Spalding United Youth Basketball. Why? Because we were created to be salt, to add value to these spaces and places. This is why we exist, to do this in certain ways, in specific ways. And will these ways change over time? Probably. It doesn't really matter what the vehicle, see what I did there, is. What matters is, dad joke, what matters is that we keep asking the question, how do we add value to the city of Griffin? And right now, this is how we do it. Another way that we were able to continue to do this is by turning a 45,000 square foot warehouse that we own in downtown Griffin back in January into a distribution center. And when those tornadoes hit, we were able to turn that space into a space where we could serve our community. In fact, I asked this past week, the GEMA, Georgia Emergency Management Director, to just kind of share a little bit from that space. And if you weren't around at that point, if you weren't with us at that point, to even just visually see what January looked like. And just a heads up, some of you, it's going to give you guys like a twitch, just because it brings back a lot. But just to see what God did, check this out.
Hey City Church, Glenn Polk here from Spalding County Fire and Emergency Management, and just want to take a minute to say thank you. Thank you for the care and compassion and prayers and blessing that you have for our community. You probably remember for several months ago, exactly on January 12th of this year, we experienced 5 devastating tornadoes in Griffin and Spalding County, and y'all are a very important part of the recovery and just the day-to-day care of folks that were affected by this tremendous disaster in our community. I come to you in our Emergency Operations Center where I was running around, and then all of a sudden I saw Josh and Warren and just what can we do, and then one thing led to another, and City Church and all your partners came together with our community just to care for them with donated goods and services just to get people by till we could get them some further assistance. We appreciate our partnership. every day, but especially during this important time in our community, and we're very blessed for it. So thank you so much, and we appreciate everything that was done.
Yeah. So salt seasons, it adds values and it preserves. And so when we did that back in January and got to be a part of it, it was an incredibly exhausting season. If you were around, it was very tiring. And when we got to the end of it, I was like, man, that was great. Like, look what we got to do. Like, look how God moved. It was awesome. And it was. But I thought it was done. I was like, okay, we'll wrap it up. February comes, 1 million pounds of supplies, 14,000 people served, 2,000 volunteers. But what I kind of knew, but I forgot, is that FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, they actually take all those things and they monetize it. And so all the things that we were able to do through the distribution center, they monetized that. And the city and county got their first checks back from FEMA this past month. And so I was talking with Glenn and Warren, our city engagement pastor, and they said, hey, he said, hey, I want you to know we got our first check back from all the hours and all the supplies that were, tabulated and calculated and weighed from that massive scale. If you were there, you know what I'm talking about. All the people that showed up and all the families that were served. And because of all those things, the city and county received a check for $1.4 million. And because of those things, just adding value. And you may ask, well, where's our check? It ain't coming. Because we're created to be salt. And we add value, no strings attached, in hopes that someone would connect what we are connected to, who we are connected to their lives as well. And so the question is, as we continue to do that, what does it look like for us moving forward? If salt was created to add value, I love Psalm 34:8 when it says, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good, which then makes us ask this question, and realize that the world can't taste if we aren't salt. And so what is the taste that you leave behind? But the bigger thing is this: with the vision of our church, the vision that Jesus has placed on our hearts, you be salt. Salt is being a Jesus movement that awakens the soul in the city. He doesn't end there, because this is what he says. He says this, that if salt lost its taste, it is no longer good for anything. And so you look at it and say, well, salt can't get diluted. It's an incredibly stable compound. There's some arguments here. But you have to go back to the context. This was a very valuable commodity. And so what would happen is, because it's valuable, is they can make a lot of money off this. So people back in that day started realizing, you know what we can do? We can take this salt that's worth a whole lot, and I think we can make more money off it. Because what we can do is we can take this very valuable, precious commodity, and we can take sand, and if we mix the two, we can make this go a lot longer and a lot further. And so what they would do is they would take salt and they would take sand and they would mix it together. And then they would take this bag and pour it back in there and they would sell it. Now, to everyone that was buying it, it didn't look any different than what they thought salt was going to look like. And for all intents and purposes, it was exactly what they needed until they tried to put it on a piece of meat and preserve the meat. And then what they thought was salt mixed with sand, and it was no longer good and no longer could do what it was created to do, which was preserve and add value. And so what was going on was these people were diluting what this valuable thing was. And in God's view, God's vision, what he's created us to be, and they diluted it with sand. Now, to where he says, you might as well just trample it, throw it on the ground, trample it, because it's no good. It doesn't do anybody any good. And here's the fear. That we will be a church that on the outside looks really good and looks like pure salt. But because we've allowed sand to creep in, we are no longer good for anything. And what happens in church and why visions die and why churches become unaffected is because they allow things to creep in to the pure salt. And once it creeps in, it no longer serves the purpose it was created to. And we've got to actually ask the question then, okay, what are those fears for us? Because here's my thing. We're about to be 5 years old. In the next 6 months, we're about to be 5 years old, okay? We're no longer the young church anymore. I get to sit in rooms with church planners that are going to plant in 6 to 9 months. And I was in a room with a few of them a few weeks ago, and I was like, yep, I'm the old guy in the room now. I mean, like, we're not that young church anymore. And the fear is that we would become a comfortable church. And comfortable like anybody else can become comfortable. And the way that we become comfortable is because when we start allowing sand to creep in with salt. And so you have to start asking the question, what are those things? What are those things that could creep in? I mean, we know this and we're so aware of it. Like every day, like it is this fear that like, God, would you keep the hearts of our leadership pure? Would you keep them pure? The heart of our leaders and those that lead other people and our city builders, people who volunteer, God, would you keep those hearts pure? Because that's a reality. We know that if not, then this thing becomes no good anymore. Gossip, gossip starts creeping in and we start talking about each other behind each other's backs, and we start breaking the unity that Jesus prayed for in John 17. It's done. We're done. We're done. I mean, you start thinking about other things like bitterness towards somebody else in the church or towards, like, let's just be real. Some of you came from another church and you're still bitter at that church and you haven't healed and you haven't had that conversation with the other pastor. You're just bringing your bitterness in here. And it doesn't do any good. We love you, but it doesn't do any good. Can I tell you one of the biggest killers of a church vision and church movement? It's preference. Now listen, let me pause. I have strong preferences about so many things. But when our preferences begin to determine our behavior, that's when it becomes dangerous. And so preferences like, I really love my seat. And I'm going to sit there, even if I see someone come in for the first time that doesn't know where they're going to go, I'm going to look at them and be back like, I got here before you, too bad, so sad. Parking spaces, I'm going to park as close as I can. And not think about the mother that's coming for the first time with 3 kids on her hip, trying to just get in to check in on her own. And not even thinking past that. It's okay you want a good seat. It's okay that you want a good parking spot. But when the good seat and the good parking spot takes place over the person that's going to come here for the first time and meet Jesus, and that's when it becomes a problem. And I am simply saying this. This isn't a reactive thing. Please hear me. Like some people came to me after last service and were like, we're so sorry. I was like, no, it wasn't literally directed at anyone. I'm just looking ahead and saying, okay, if we're not careful, like this is what happens. These things creep in. And a parking spot and a seat that we want turns into greater things. Like I think we should do it this way. And if we're not going to do it this way, then I'm out, right? And our preferences, that's what we say when we meet people for the first time at Next Step Lunch. Because we're followers of Jesus, our preferences actually matter the least. It's literally what it means dying to ourselves every day means. We begin to think about other things. Politics, race. Like we've had people leave this church because they don't want to hear about diversity. And maybe you're hearing like, I'm not all there yet. And I'm not saying you have to be, but what I am saying is that when we swallow our preferences, we say, you know what, I'm willing to lean in a room with everybody else, and I'm willing to at least let God teach me, and I'm willing to learn. Some of my preferences die all of a sudden, but I'm willing to step into that space somehow. Our preferences can kill the movement of our church. Can kill it. In fact, here's what I'd say. I'm gonna push you real fast, okay? Push you a little bit. Just a little gentle nudge, okay? The best thing you can do right now for our church is sit like 2 to 3 rows closer than you are right now. I'm dead serious. Like 2 to 3 rows for the one person that is going to come in for the first time and feel like, I don't have anywhere to sit. And I know some of us, I love my back row, okay? I'm closing my eyes so I don't look at anybody because I'm not calling anybody out. I really am not. I love the back row, but when it comes to that mom, that dad, that family walking in for the first time and freaking out because they feel like there's nowhere to sit, and they see a back row that's completely open, that's a clear path for somebody. It's these little things that matter so much to the church and the movement and the direction of our church. Am I saying you can't have an opinion? No. Am I saying you can't come and ask me questions? Absolutely not. Let's have conversations. But when preferences take priority over people, we're no longer salt, and it's no longer good anymore. And I'll tell you, we believe that Jesus has called us to be a church that is reaching the person that doesn't know Jesus. And so we have to be so mindful that we don't end up looking like this in a few years and looking back and say, how did we get here? We got here because our preferences started taking priority over people. That's why I love to see how like our leaders are making decisions right now. Like Brittany, our City Kids director, there's this event called Kidpalooza coming up, and she's been doing it for 3 years. And she came about 3 months ago to me and said, hey, listen, the way we're doing Kidpalooza, we're running out of capacity and space for kids. And we can put more kids in here, but it's not gonna create a safe space for them. And so here's what I'm thinking. Like I want to create 2 Kidpaloozas. I want to create one for younger kids and one for older kids. And now here's what happens when we communicate. We can easily say, change, sand, right? But the vision's the same. It's people over preference. And what she's saying is, I'm going to inconvenience myself even more, and our city builders are going to inconvenience themselves even more, and we're going to do 2 separate nights for Kidpalooza so young kids can be in a safe space that's age appropriate, that they can teach directly to them, and the older kids can have a space as well. And guess what that does? That opens up twice as much room for new kids that have never been to Kidpalooza in hopes that they would come, create a connection, and come to find Jesus. I love that. I love that. Like yesterday, and our city students, Morgan and our city students director and leaders sat outside for about 7 hours at the Docker Holiday Festival selling barbecue. If you would have asked them, hey, what do you want to do on a Saturday? For 7 hours. I mean, I love Morgan. I don't think she's going to be like, you know what sounds great? To sit in the heat. Can we have more of that, please? But why does she do it? To raise money so that she could cut down the cost of their summer camp so more students could have a clear path to go to camp. Because it's people over preference every time. In our lives, this is what it has to look like. And we will continue to make decisions to reach people. Like at some point, a third service is coming, and someone's going to say, that's sand. No, it's to create more space so more people can come to know Jesus. A better way to put it is this, is that Jesus' movements prioritize people over preference. The biblical way to put it, Philippians 2:3, Paul says it, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. This is the vision for the church of Jesus, the movement of Jesus. But this is also the vision for you personally. Because some of us, if we're honest, Jesus has called us to be salt, and we've allowed sin to creep in. And on the outside, everything looks great. But on the inside, it's no good. You've allowed pride, selfishness. You said, oh, you know what, I'll just look at that thing one time on my phone. And it's led to more and more and more. I'll just lie this one time to my spouse, and it's led to more and more and more. I'll work a few more hours here and neglect my family a little bit more, and it's led to more and more and more. I'm just going to do this for me this one time, and it's led to more and more and more. This is the vision for your life, is to be salt that adds value to everything it comes in contact with, but you can't add value to your marriage if you're lying to your spouse. It's nothing. No good. You can't add value to your family if you're neglecting them. You can't add value to your own life if there is a secret sin that you've allowed to creep into your life. This is the vision for our lives. And until we get those things right, Jesus can't use us in the way he wants to. Now, the beauty of this is that the grace of Jesus actually makes us righteous and makes us this again. the beauty of that is that you can be salt, but you first got to say, I've let some sand come in. I've let some sand creep in, and I need Jesus to heal it. That's where we're at this morning. That's where we're at. You've made some decisions that have brought you comfort that has ended up hurting the people around you. You can't be who you've created to be. We got to start there.